It is Thursday, July 21st, 2022. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Those of you following us on the Book of Face, Twitter, or YouTube can see the handsome faces of Bill Kurelic and Mark Porter here for their usual Thursday appearance. It's been a very interesting last 7 days on the recruiting trail for us to kind of summarize here, and get to it. There have been some very interesting commitments to here and elsewhere, so this promises to be an excellent show. I think what we'll do is we have a couple topics we know we're going to hit, and then I have a very strong feeling that the questions are going to line up very nicely with the topics we want to discuss. So we'll try and dovetail those in there. Gentlemen, let's start with this. Some positivity, Bill. Yesterday, we thought we might be getting a commitment from Desmond Umeozulu, defensive end out of Prince George's County in the D.C. area. A bit of a false alarm, Bill, but our optimism is still high.
Yeah, I was told middle of the afternoon or so that don't be surprised if Desmond doesn't make a commitment soon. In fact, the person I was talking to told me don't be surprised if he announces that his commitment announcement will be on August 29th. And I said, oh, that's kind of a long ways away. But anyway, I got a story already. And lo and behold, he posted on Twitter his Final Four, the expected Final Four. He made official visits to Ohio State as well as South Carolina, North Carolina, and Pitt. Those is his Final Four, and that he indeed was waiting to announce on August 29th. So, we wait for that announcement. But I think, as you said, Dan, those aren't exactly the three schools Ohio State does a lot of recruiting against and loses often to.
Yeah, it was surprising to see that Final Four. I don't see any of those three teams making a push, and sometimes when they do that, I sometimes think they're fishing for that one other big offer, but he's not going to play in any games before August 29th. So maybe he's picked that day because it's their kickoff. I'm not sure, but we will get into that. One of the names that's popping up on the questions here right now, Mike Hauser's first, and I knew this was going to happen, so let's just do this now and get it over with. Caleb Downs, safety out of Georgia. There was I don't know if it was a report or a tweet or something entered the recruiting space about a week ago that the vibe was he was going to Alabama, and then no commitment. This coming on the heels of seeing Justice Haynes surprisingly commit to Alabama, which, like I said to Dwayne on Tuesday, was the first time in this recruiting cycle that I felt like I got kicked in the nuts. But, Bill, I think there's some general negativity that the safety Downs will end up in Alabama, but Ohio State has not given up. How optimistic are you? And should Bucknutters be hopeful?
Well, several things there. I do think he is trending to Alabama, and I think if he were to announce right now, he would probably announce for Alabama. But he has not even set an announcement date yet. Does that mean he couldn't announce later today or tomorrow or next week? No, of course not. Justice Haynes did not set an announcement date. He just all of a sudden on Sunday announced he was headed to Alabama. So that does still happen. I will say that Ohio State has not given up on him. They are continuing to recruit him, feeling like they have a chance at him still. You look at the Ohio State commitments, they're still trying to recruit him. The people from our Alabama site have not crystal balled him to Alabama as example. So, we'll wait and see. I think the best way to put it is that if you're an Ohio State person, you want it to keep going on because, again, if he announces today, for instance, and I'm not saying he's going to even think about announcing today, but if he did, I would think it would be for Alabama, but it continues to play out.
Yeah, Downs is a biggie. It is safety, so I think you make an argument it's not the most important position on the field, but I do think there's a clear at least love affair with Bucknutters for Downs, and justifiably so. If you come down to Ohio State and Alabama, you're pretty much have an NFL locker all dusted off, or you're just waiting for the slide in the nameplate. All right, Mark. You knew this was coming. This is the 3-1 fastball, and hopefully your vocal cords are well massaged. Tackett Curtis opted against Ohio State. He will go to USC, possibly to help rebuild the Trojans, if that's even going to happen. But Ohio State is also after another linebacker, an Arvell Reese. We've talked much more about Tackett Curtis. If you were on Ohio State's staff, would you rather have Arvell Reese or Tackett Curtis, and why?
Okay, I'm going to take a step back here and say I'm the analyst that is going to cut against the grain and try not to be a part of groupthink and try not to be a ranking slave. And when a prospect doesn't pick Ohio State, I'm not automatically going to say, oh, now he's a bad. And that's something message boards have done for years. And I've always said that every time someone doesn't commit, oh, they're no good anymore. Caleb Downs is no good. Tackett Curtis is no good. We didn't want him anyways. Okay.
Hold on one sec. You're right. Let me just say this for the record, though. If we've talked about a guy as much as we have Curtis or anyone like that, they're legit. This is just shades of gray for us. We're not in any way saying Tackett Curtis can't play or couldn't play at Ohio State or they didn't want him, because you're right. And I hate that as well. It's always like, well, he chose someone else and he was, he's the bad girlfriend.
Yeah, and I'm not always the devil's advocate, so I just wanted to qualify what I'm about to say, that I'm trying not to be that type of an analyst. I'm trying, like, as I evaluate for Scouting Ohio, I try to give it a fair thing where I put it out, and I don't change based on where they go or if I like where they go. That all being said, okay, I was one of the first to point out that Tackett Curtis's film was amazing, but yet it was a unique film where he had a position where he was running downhill unblocked a lot and had a lot of wow plays, and it really got the fans excited. I always thought he was a true Mike linebacker. I always thought his track times and his body style kind of dictated true Mike, but with an extra gear of speed he had. The hitting ability is going to show up throughout a game, wherever he's lined up at Mike, but I never really thought he was a strong safety type or that versatile. I always thought Trey Bowles, when you guys asked, was definitely more athletic, more versatile than Tackett Curtis. So that's where I kind of stood on Tackett. Arvell Reese is a different type of linebacker. He's a longer player. He's an outside type player, maybe growing the defensive end type player down the road. He's really got a lot of length, and he's really young in his development. You can tell that his body has not filled out. The Glenville coaches, in fact, were bragging at the beginning of the year how much weight he was putting on in the weight room initially, kind of signaling that he had development ahead of him. If I had to pick one, I'm not just going to pick Arvell because, Tackett Curtis is going to USC. I've been a Glenville homer forever, so I would pick him based on that. But Arvell's different. So it's like you have a blonde and a brunette, and you're trying to choose, and they're not the same, but they're both very attractive. If they were both Mike linebackers, I'd say, okay, one's a 95 rating, one's a 93, and they're pretty much the same person, the same build, same speed. Arvell's longer. Arvell's a little different. Arvell could play inside. He played a little will and ran around there, but he's a little longer than your traditional will. I want to say Arvell is going to be close to 6'4" or bigger by the time he's done. He's really he kind of comes off as a defensive end when you see him on the field for the first time, until you see him run, and then you see the linebacker explosion and that type of stuff. So not to be a homer for Glenville or whatever, but they're different. If I was to give them ratings, maybe Arvell's probably a 96, and inside maybe the other guy's a 96 or a 95, Tackett. So that might not be a crystal clear answer. They're both, like you said, they're both great players. Ohio State wants both, and if Tackett would switch, I'm sure they'd take them. But Arvell is definitely different, and I say Arvell might have the NFL upside. Like a traditional Mike linebacker isn't as valuable as those edge guys that can come off the edge, string things out, drop into coverage. That's a different skill set. So, yeah, my vocal cords are warmed up, and there's your long answer.
Excuse me. Reese actually sounds a little bit more like Baron Browning off the tip. If you go by that evaluation, which would be great.
Think Josh Perry when you think Arvell Reese. If you threw Arvell a tailback type pitch, he would look like Josh Perry running the ball in high school. They're both 6'4", 230, 6'5"-ish. It's going to be that type of player.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but Josh Perry at Olentangy, I think it was just Olentangy, was also
Olentangy High School. Yeah.
Yeah, he played some running back, so I'm sure that was a lot of fun being a 160-pound DB with him coming around the corner. Aim for the ankles. All right, Bill, you spent plenty of time talking to Team Curtis. Why don't you put a bow on that recruitment?
Well, I think a lot of it was just that he wanted to go. Not every recruit has more than one reason they pick a school, but I know that with him, USC, and they've done this with many recruits this cycle, and they'll do it next cycle, and it's smart recruiting. They're selling that they have been a program that's been down and that they're going to return. This class and next class can be the classes that return USC to greatness, to prominence, rather than go to a program like Ohio State that is already at greatness. They can be the class that gets USC turned around and back to the top. And I think that sold with Tackett some, and with other recruits too. And I think that's basically the bottom line. I know for a fact that he was torn. It was a very, very tough decision for him. Ohio State was right there, and it was a hard decision.
We should all have to make such tough decisions before we enter college, whether to go to USC or Ohio State. I imagine my guy's not going to struggle socially in either spot. Speaking of 6'4" blondes. All right, let's talk about some other guys. There's going to be some negativity here. You just got to grin and bear it, Bill. Jayden Bonsu announced his final 3. Excuse me, and Olaus Alinen is about to commit. Both at one point in time we thought might be Buckeyes. It does not seem that's the case. Can you bring us up to speed?
Yeah, Jayden Bonsu delayed his announcement. He hasn't said exactly when now he will announce. He was going to announce on July 20th, but he delayed that. It could come this weekend. In fact, I kind of think it will come this weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. And I'm still hearing Miami on that one. Ohio State, though, is like in the case of Caleb Downs. They are continuing to recruit Jayden Bonsu. They want him. They're continuing to recruit him. So you never know. It's hard to ever count Ohio State out the way they recruit. But again, as of the way things stand right now, I think that one's still Miami. Alinen is going to announce his decision tomorrow. He's supposed to announce his decision tomorrow on Friday. And that one, I'm not convinced that one's going to be Miami. I know that there's been a lot of crystal balls there. Alabama is still working on him. And that's why I haven't crystal balled him, because I'm not sure which one he's going to. I don't know that he knows for sure. Both schools are still recruiting him hard. The bad news is I just don't think it's going to be Ohio State. So what difference does it make for the most part? When you come in second in recruiting, it's no different than coming in ninth. So,
Agreed.
I think it'll be Miami or Alabama. We'll wait and see on that one.
I think that reminds me of my old track coach. If you ain't first, you're last. So we'll deal with it. Let's take a quick break for those on the pod, and then we'll come back and get into some offensive line chatter. All right, we are back. Mark, later today, we are going to have a commitment evaluation up there for Miles Walker, offensive lineman from Loomis Chaffee up in New England. There has been some consternation as we come off Olaus Alinen, likely headed elsewhere. He certainly won't be to Ohio State. There's been some consternation about the offensive line haul. I was hoping you could put Miles Walker into perspective. And then, Bill, maybe let everybody know. I think there's the sky is falling when people think about the offensive line. I'm not sure that's the case. So evaluation and then perspective.
Yeah. Sometimes people on the boards fall in love with a player. And I was going to say with the Arvell Reese, Tackett Curtis, I think the public evaluation of Tackett Curtis was 100, where I probably had him as a 95 or a 94. And, Olaus Alinen had a big public evaluation where they all loved him. I don't think many people were talking about Miles Walker. And I put on the tape and I was like, why weren't we talking about Miles Walker? And I did the same thing with Noah Rogers a few weeks ago, where the public evaluation of him wasn't as high as a Carnell Tate. Everyone fell in love with the IMG receiver. He was on TV. He was easy to digest for the fans. But Noah, wasn't really someone in their zone. Where do you get to know these guys? Why do you see them? Miles Walker is the left tackle body that this class was looking for. Let's remind people, Luke Montgomery started off as an offer very early, and he was only 6'3", 4 when he was offered. he's longer. That's the first thing Bill and I said when we saw him walk onto the Ohio State campus. He grew vertically. He got longer. He actually lengthened out where, yeah, we're talking about tackle with him now. He was always a great athletic guard, but now he's long enough to play the edge. He is a long tackle body. So, but Bucknutters, I think, want that left tackle, first-round draft pick looking player, and that's what I think you're going to get more with Walker. You put on the tape with Walker, the first thing I did is break him down in pass protection. He does a great job of being an athlete and kick stepping and locking guys out, has the long arms, checks all the boxes as a pass protector. When you watch him in space, and I always talk about Ohio State zone blocks. We watch film on Ohio State all the time. They're not down blocking. They're not gap blocking. They're not running tray. They're not running the power O. They are running zone, which means if you're a tackle, you got to be able to kick step with your right foot and try to get out on the edge. And there's 4 or 5 clips of him using that technique to get out on the edge and run in space. And that's when I think I clicked on that this kid's a special athlete at his size. So when you watch the tape of him today, you're going to see him broken down a couple different ways. But Ohio State found the left tackle in this class they wanted. Maybe he doesn't have the name recognition or the public evaluation. But, you know, for me, watching tape and with the Bucknutters are going to see later today, they're going to be happy.
Bill, is this a kind of a trust in the Ohio State staff kind of vibe here?
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Mark said there. Steve Addazio is one of the top offensive line coaches in the country. Some consider him the top college offensive line coach in the country. Steve Addazio is Texas A&M's offensive line coach. Really, really good to say the least. And he recruited Miles Walker. Miles Walker's from Connecticut, so is Addazio. That was a big win for Ohio State. Miles Walker had Texas A&M as an official visit besides Ohio State. He also had a Penn State offer. That was a big win, and I agree with what Mark said. Miles Walker, he's got a lot of potential. And as far as the whole situation, the offensive line, Ohio State has filled their needs. They went into this recruiting cycle wanting to get 4 offensive linemen, 2 interior guys, 2 offensive tackles. They filled their needs. They were only going to take a 5th offensive lineman if it was a player that they really saw as a guy with a high ceiling, a guy that maybe would be along the lines of a Paris Johnson, maybe coming out of high school. Olaus Alinen. He's not Paris Johnson coming out of high school. He's not that kind of guy, but he's kind of approaching that. So he was the guy that they were going to take for the 5th spot. But they did get their goals filled with 2 very good interior offensive linemen in the kids from Ohio, of course, Josh Padilla and Austin Sierravelt. And then they got their 2 tackles. Luke Montgomery is a top 50 to 75 prospect overall across the country, and then Miles Walker. It would have been nice to get Olaus Alinen, but they'll kick that scholarship ahead to next year if they don't end up filling it this year, and that's probably what's going to happen. So they have filled their needs. Even if Paris Johnson goes to the NFL after this season, the way things stand right now, Ohio State will have 17 offensive linemen, scholarship offensive linemen on the roster, even with Paris Johnson leaving. The usual number is 16 to 18. So they could have taken that 1 extra guy to make 18, but they didn't have to. They're still okay.
Yeah, it would be definitely surprising if Paris Johnson is not in the draft. Let's hit another name that is, I probably should have brought up earlier because I knew it was going to come up, and he's allegedly committing on July the 28th, and that is John Walker. Mark, you've done a review of him. He's a fantastic prospect. He's one of those guys that I think didn't start out as a Bucknutters love and has grown into the apple of almost everybody's eye. If you could kind of give us your thoughts on him, and then Bill, maybe an update of what you expect to happen on the 28th.
Yeah, I think someone kind of accurately depicted him last week as one of those SEC defensive line run stoppers, one of those Clemson, Alabama, Georgia type defensive linemen. And that's what he is, an athletic big man, a rare type of skill set. You don't find big men with feet like that and power like that. He's one of those guys you can stick in at one technique and he eats up the middle, but he's also got some athletic ability. It was shocking that he could move so well, being as big as he is. And he's a young kid to be that big. So as he gets into a weight room and he really starts to develop grown man power, I think he's going to be like an anchor, or like running into a tree stump in the middle of your defensive line. Like try to move the tree stump out of there and get to linebackers. And I'm going to say right now, he's a linebacker's best friend, because if a center and guard go to double team him, he's going to grab both of them, and the other guy's never going to get to the linebacker. So he's really a weapon from his athletic ability, his size, and the way he functions in a defense, freeing up a linebacker to get the other gaps and be a sideline guy.
I'm no scout, but I will tell you this. If you watch the tape, his punch off the snap, he is jolting dudes. I mean, it is a violent action. Bill?
Yeah, I've gotten to know John pretty well. Dating back to over a year ago, I was in Florida, and Kissimmee Osceola High School is one of the schools I stopped at because they had Derek LeBlanc, the defensive end, and John Walker, the defensive tackle. At that point, more people were talking about Derek LeBlanc, but John Walker every bit as good, and you can make a case for being even better. I met with those two at their high school, talked to them and all, and got to know them. I've continued to talk to John Walker. What a nice young man, by the way, off the field. On the field, as Mark said, he is tremendous. Ohio State really wants him. Will they get him? It's getting tight. I crystal balled him early to Ohio State, but some things have come into play. Number one, the family likes the idea of him staying closer to home. UCF, believe it or not, that's right in his backyard. He made an official visit there. Florida is working hard to get him. Those two obviously are much closer to home than Ohio State is for him. Again, situation right now, I still have him crystal ball to Ohio State, and I hate to switch those crystal ball picks, but that one's not impossible for me to switch at this point. I like, again, slightly where Ohio State stands with John Walker, but we've got about a week for Florida and UCF to continue working on him, and they want him too, and we'll see what happens in the next week for John Walker. He's a guy Ohio State really wants to get.
It's just hard to get those big guys out of the South, man. If you just look at the track record, Ohio State recruits nationally as well as anybody, and it's just difficult to do. As much as I get my optimism up, and I was with you, Bill, maybe my fandom took over, and I thought we were getting John Walker, and now I'm starting to get a really, really oogie. All right, let's just go through some questions here. We'll go rapid fire. You guys can take them as you want. Nick Stamen, why is Mark Fletcher not considered an every down back? Want to take that, Mark?
Yeah, and I don't know who is not considering him that. I don't know if he's listed as something else right now, but until he proves otherwise, he can. I remember vividly pointing out his receiving ability in his hands. Sometimes when you're a bigger back, sometimes people think you can't do the receiving work, but usually the bigger backs are the guys that can stay on the field 3 downs. And usually that's about pass protection and what you can do. Until he proves he isn't, he is. He's got the size, the speed to get on the field in first and second down and hammer you. And on third downs, he can be a receiver. Will it look like that at the college level or even, in the NFL level? Maybe. But I wouldn't say there's anyone to say he can't do that yet.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, I don't know if it's because there was almost like a group of more traditional halfbacks at the top of the recruiting, at the top of the class that everyone was focused on, but there has been just this acceptance of Fletcher as just like a fullback. Bill, that's just not an accurate representation of him, don't you think? Do you think it is, or how do they view him?
The name that just popped in my head is Leonard Fournette. In the NFL, people thought he was a big back, and guess who has 70 receptions every year? Leonard Fournette. Right. And you get this perception big guys can't be a threat out there. Well, in space, do you want to tackle the big guy that's 230 pounds or 220 pounds, Cap? And it's like you're saying, people think, the traditional tailback's a jitterbug out there, and he'd be a tough tackle. Where a big guy out there is a tough tackle too, and big guys can be 3 down backs too.
Yeah, and with Fletcher, I I see a big guy that can run. Maybe he's not the elite speed back, but he's also a big guy. He's not 5'10" and 185 pounds. And I go back. Ohio State likes this guy a lot, Mark Fletcher. They took him early when they still very much were in the running to land guys like Richard Young and Justice Haynes, and they took Mark Fletcher really early. They like him a lot. And I always go back to their evaluations of running backs have been pretty good, going back to a guy that everyone knows, Ezekiel Elliott. When everybody was talking about Derek Green, they went for Ezekiel Elliott. And, we kind of know how that one turned out.
Derek Green. People,
Yeah.
go to the Google, people. Kurelic just goes deep on you. Gracious.
Let me dive into this running back thing a little more and talk about I talk to running back coaches, and sometimes you're thinking, oh, we just want the guy with the fastest guy or the great speed. I talked to a really good running back coach, and he told me something that stuck with me. He goes, the best running backs I've ever coached have a plan when they get to the hole or when they see a defender. Whether it's power, a move, whatever it is, they have a plan. And sometimes big backs like Baxter, big backs like Baxter, or even a Le'Veon Bell, who was a linebacker we thought coming out of high school. When those guys get the ball in their hands, they use their size to set you up, and they understand their body and momentum and power and the cutting ability, and they have a plan to set people up and shake them down and get out of it. And that's a trait that I don't think people talk about very often. There's some guys who just catch the ball, run like their hair's on fire, and that works out. Bursting the space. I say some running backs run in fear where they're just looking for grass where no one else is at, and there's, hair's on fire to get to those spots, and that works. But some of these bigger backs, if they truly have the feet and they can see how to set people up and have a plan, like I was told, they're just as dangerous as anybody that open field. Ezekiel Elliott's a great example. That guy has a plan. He has the feet to execute the plan when he sees somebody, and he's been doing it for a long time.
Listen, Zeke might be the best college running back. I don't know. I don't want to get too hyperbolic here, but people remember what that was like. The run he had down the stretch was, put it this way, he was the best player on the field. And that's very hard to do in a college football playoff, and it's proven out.
And also, Dan, on Zeke, the thing that I thought was the difference maker for him is that he was truly, not just hyperbole, the complete back.
Yep. Tremendous
blocker, just a great blocker, in addition to being a great runner. And then he could catch the ball too. He could do it all.
Yeah. Well, it's proven out. I mean, if you go look, by the way, who has the most rushing yards since Zeke entered the league? The answer is Zeke. He was so good that now people get on him. But like you said, the reason they can't get him out of the backfield in Dallas is he doesn't give up any sacks. He keeps the quarterback healthy, man.
Yep.
That's a big deal. Don't sleep on that in the NFL. You cannot play running back in the NFL if you're going to let the guy making $40 million get hit on a consistent basis. They're not into that. All right. Bill, I've had this up there from Randy Bills. Are we still recruiting McLean? I assume he means Cormani, the nation's #1 rated corner.
He's still on the radar, but realistically, I just don't see him ending up at Ohio State. I never did, and I still don't. Alabama, watch out for Alabama there. Florida is there too. I know that Brandon Innes, Ohio State's great wide receiver commitment, would love to see Cormani join them. Those guys are part of that South Florida Express team. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Brandon Innes and Mark Fletcher, high school teammates, by the way. Spider Sillery, on the heels of the Tackett Curtis chatter, will there be 2 linebackers this year or just Arvell?
Personally, I think the chances are good that it'll be just Arvell. And again, I hate to keep getting back to numbers, but if you look at the numbers, Ohio State is okay there. They've got 10 scholarship linebackers on the roster right now, not counting our buddy Sonny Styles, who I think Mark and I agree is a great candidate to be a linebacker at Ohio State. So if you put him in there in the mix, whether he plays safety this year and eventually transition line or whatever, if you put him into the mix, they would have 11 scholarship linebackers on the roster. The usual number is 10 to 12. Jim Knowles' defense doesn't emphasize linebackers as much. So if they have 11 linebackers on the roster now, only one of them is a sure thing gone after this season. So that would take them to 10. They add Arvell, that would be 11. So they can get away with 11 easily linebackers. I no doubt they're going to continue to pursue linebackers. They would like to get Darian Gillette. They like him a lot out of Texas. He tells me he wants to make a visit back to Ohio State for a game. So we'll see. I tend to think he will, although Texas is pressing to get him to commit first. But that's going to be a really difficult pull to get him out of Texas, away from the Longhorns and away from Texas A&M.
We would be remiss if we did not mention Matayo Uiagalelei. You have a complete acceptance of your inability to spell the name. I've had to have it actually tattooed on my right wrist to make sure it's correct. This is a huge recruit. They need the big-time defensive end in this class, like every class. And, this is a guy who's, rocketing up the recruiting rankings. Mark, maybe what you think of Matayo. Is he worth the hype? And then, Bill, where do they stand?
Yeah, he's worth the hype. And again, I just used the analogy of a tree stump as a defensive lineman. I could use it again for him. The strength and the power and the size and what he can do on the edge of the defense, whether he's a 5 technique or he bumps down to a 3 technique as he gets bigger. He's a run stopper first, but he has the pass rush skills and the pass rush ability to push the pocket, cave things in from the inside, and he'll get you off the edge. I mean, a lot of high school linemen can't handle that size and that speed off the edge, but I think he's just such a big, powerful player. I think in college he might be moving down because nobody gets smaller in Mariotti's weight room. No one comes out weaker. So you have to project these guys 10 to 20% bigger, stronger than you see them in high school and kind of do the projection. What will he look like then? And yeah, big time run stopper. And I used this analogy last week, and I hate to say it again, but running backs come off the street in the NFL all the time to go for 100 yards. Big men like this don't grow on trees. And if I had scholarships and I was going to go over in a position, it'd be at left tackle and it'd be at defensive line. Take as many big guys as you can.
Bill?
Yeah, if I was lining up my guys that I would most want to crystal ball right now, down to the least, Matayo would be one of my least wanting to crystal ball him right now because it's really going to be interesting to see what he does. He's made official visit to Ohio State and then Oregon, USC. He's not going to decide in the next month. He's going to take more visits come the fall. Alabama's on his list. It remains to be seen. I think Ohio State is right there with any of the schools right now. But I think there's a reason nobody at all has crystal balled Matayo to a school yet. And that's for good reason. I could see him ending up at Ohio State. I think they're right there, but we'll see. USC and Alabama and Oregon are all huge threats to land him as well.
All right, last question, Bill. I'll let you take it. One big need in 23 is quarterback. Are we going to get Austin Novosad? Spelling question mark again. We keep recruiting these guys with unique names. Where are the Smiths? Where are the Williams for Dan to make it easier? But this guy is, I think, is Baylor, Texas A&M. He's a legacy. His offers came in late. Ohio State's got a stacked quarterback room in front and behind. Your thoughts, Bill, as we close the show.
At one point, Austin Novosad, I was relatively convinced he was pretty close to committing to Ohio State and flipping from Baylor. I don't think that was a sure thing, but I felt like that's where it was headed. Then Texas A&M comes in with the offer, and his family is a Texas A&M family. Then more recently, just a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, Notre Dame comes in with an offer, and he's going to maybe take a look at the Irish. We'll see. He's going to take his time. He is not going to rush into things. There's a reason he hasn't decided yet, because he's not sure where he wants to go. I've had a good source tell me they think in the end it'll be Texas A&M. I've had another good source from Texas tell me in the end they don't think it's going to be Texas A&M, that it's going to be either Baylor or Ohio State. So I think it's a situation again where Ohio State is going to be in there, like with Caleb Downs at 1 or 2. They just need to be number 1 rather than number 2 for Austin Novosad. And Texas A&M complicated things with them offering other guys and not going after Novosad. Had they gone after him right away, I think he would be ending up there. Now we'll just have to wait and see. The final thing I'll say about that, people aren't giving enough credence to how important a quarterback is for Ohio State to get. If C.J. Stroud leaves after this season, and if he stays healthy, I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt he's going to go to the NFL. If he goes to the NFL, they've only got 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. As things stand right now for next season, that's pretty dangerous to go into a season with 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster.
I don't want to get too far ahead of myself as we end the show here, but I have a feeling in the next 12 months, Ohio State is going to utilize the transfer portal more than usual after this season, just the way the roster is filling out or lack thereof. We appreciate these dudes. Go ahead.
At the risk of extending the show another minute or so, let me throw out a dark horse. There's a quarterback in Ohio. There's only 3 quarterbacks in Ohio that have a Division I offer right now. The best of the bunch is Brock Lowry. And when I watched him camp last year, he was about 195 pounds. And it's no secret I'm from Canfield. He's from Canfield. And I've watched him work out recently for Indiana and a few other schools. And just the other day he worked out, and he was about 215 pounds. And Drew Aller kind of popped up in my head and said, you know what? Here's an in-state kid that's committed to Indiana who has significantly progressed over the summer. And he didn't camp at Ohio State. He didn't do all that stuff. He was happy with Indiana at the beginning of the process. But here's a kid in Ohio that if you're looking for a gap quarterback to fill in where no one else is really jumping at that spot, just like Drew Aller last year, we were all talking week 4, week 5. The Buckeyes offered Drew Aller. Where did that come from? This is maybe a 1 in 1,000 shot, a 1 in 100, but there's a name in Ohio. If you wanted a dark horse, Brock Lowry from Canfield, 6'3", 210-pound quarterback that's ripping it.
If you see the Ohio State staff get in on Brock Lowry early or anytime now, you'll know that the Ohio State staff listens and watches all of the Bucknuts Morning 5, almost 38 minutes for them to get a quarterback name. Let's see how strong their stick-to-itiveness is with the show. We appreciate these guys stopping by. I honestly believe they're the best in the business and hope we answered as many questions as possible. We could sit here and talk recruiting all day, but we got work to do. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show. Dave Biddle will be here with bells on. Have a good one, Bucknutters.